31 years of shift work at a paper mill will either break you or make you very, very patient. I got patient. When I retired at 62, Claire and I sold the house in Sudbury. The one with the cracked driveway I'd been meaning to fix for 11 years, and bought a place on the shore of Lake Nipissing. Not a mansion. 3 bedrooms, a screened porch, a dock that needed 2 new boards, and a wood stove that worked better than anything we'd had in the city. We paid cash for most of it. We'd lived carefully. We didn't have expensive habits. I drove the same truck for 14 years. Claire made her own jam. That's who we were. For 10 months, it was everything we'd worked for. I'd get up at 5:45, make coffee on the propane burner, and sit on the dock while the mist came off the water. Claire would join me around 7 with a second cup and a book she'd inevitably fall asleep reading. Our daughter, Simone, called on Sundays. Our grandson, Felix, was 3 years old and thought I hung the moon. Life had the kind of shape I'd spent 3 decades working toward. I had no idea how fast a shape like that can be unmade. Simone had married Phillip 2 years before we moved. I want to be fair to Phillip. He worked hard, he made Simone laugh, and he was patient with Felix in ways that mattered. But Phillip had one quality I'd clocked at the engagement dinner and filed away without saying a word about it to anyone, not even Claire. He spoke about things that hadn't happened yet, as if they already had. He'd say, "When we do the renovation, not if." He'd say, "Once the cabin is set up," about a plan that was still just a conversation. It wasn't lying exactly. It was a way of making the future feel decided before anyone had actually agreed to it. I noticed. I said nothing. I was patient. The call came on a Thursday in April. Simone, which was unusual for a Thursday. She said she and Phillip wanted to drive up that weekend, just for a visit, catch up. I said of course. Claire made a roast. Phillip waited until the dishes were in the rack before he started. He had that talent. Let people get comfortable first. Let the food settle. Let the evening feel warm. Then he set his mug down and said, "So I wanted to talk to you both about something, about Mum and Dad, his parents, Roberta and Dennis." I knew Dennis a little. Quiet man, retired school principal, had a bad knee from an old hockey injury that had never quite healed right. He walked with a cane in cold weather. Roberta I knew less, which was, I would later understand, by design on her part. She was the kind of person who kept herself slightly blurry until the moment she needed to be in focus. "They've had a rough stretch," Phillip said. "The condo fees went up again, and with Dad's knee, the stairs are getting to be a problem. They need somewhere quieter, somewhere with some space." Claire was watching him. I was watching Claire. "We were thinking," Phillip continued, "just temporarily, while they figure out next steps, maybe they could come up here, use the 3rd bedroom." The dock creaked outside. A loon went off somewhere on the north end of the lake. I remember thinking that loon had better timing than most people I'd known. "Temporarily," I said. 3 months, maybe 4 at the outside, just until they get sorted. I looked at Simone. She was looking at the table. The wood grain on that table, apparently, was the most fascinating thing in the room. "Let us think about it," Claire said. Phillip smiled. He smiled before she'd finished the sentence. It was such a small thing. Most people wouldn't have caught it. I caught it. I didn't sleep well that night. What came next I can only describe as a coordinated effort. Roberta called Claire 4 times in the following week. Not me, Claire. She understood instinctively who the warmer target was. Dennis sent a text to my phone, brief and polite, saying he knew it was an imposition and he was sorry to put us in this position. The text had Roberta's handwriting all over it, figuratively speaking. It was too calibrated, too designed to sound reluctant. Simone called 3 times in 5 days, which she'd never done before. She used phrases I recognized as not entirely her own. "It's just that they're struggling. Family takes care of each other. Dad, the 3rd bedroom just sits empty anyway." That last one, I let it land. Then I let it sit. Claire softened. I watched it happen the way I'd watched ice on the lake soften in March, gradually, then all at once. She started saying things like, "It's only a few months, and Dennis seems genuinely unwell." She wasn't wrong about Dennis. I did feel for Dennis. That was real. The night Phillip came alone was when I understood the full shape of what was happening. He arrived on a Tuesday afternoon, no Simone, no Felix. He sat across from me at the kitchen table and put his hands flat on the surface, like a man who'd taken a negotiation seminar once, and remembered the bit about open body language. I get the sense there's some hesitation, he said. Sharp, I said. I just want to understand your concerns. My concern, I said carefully, is that this is our home. Claire and I bought it. We saved for it, we planned for it, and right now it feels like the plan is being made for us. He nodded. Kept nodding the way people do when they're waiting for you to stop talking. I hear you, he said. And I respect that. I do. But I want to be honest with you. He paused, the way people pause when they're about to say something they've rehearsed. Simone is really carrying this. She feels stuck between you and my parents, and that kind of stress, it gets into a marriage, you know? It gets into everything. I heard that, all of it. He just used my daughter's emotional state as a bargaining chip. He'd wrapped it in concern, but that's what it was. Let me talk to Claire, I said. He left looking satisfied. I stood at the front window and watched his truck turn out of the lane, and I made a phone call. My old shift supervisor at the mill, a woman named Blythe, who'd gone into property management, consulting after she retired, was the first person I called. We'd known each other for 15 years. She was the kind of person who, when you told her you thought something was going wrong, didn't try to talk you out of it. I need a security system, I said. Cameras, inside and out, what kind of coverage? Everything. Front door, kitchen, main room, back porch, driveway. You going away? No, I said. I'm staying put. I just need to know what happens in my own house. A pause. Then, how soon? Blythe came out 4 days later with her nephew, who did the installation. 5 cameras total. Front entry, main living room, kitchen, screen porch, and driveway. All connected to an app on my phone and backed up to a private server. Motion activated, audio enabled. I checked the Ontario regulations. Single-party consent on private property. Legal. I moved our important papers, Claire's mother's jewelry, and anything irreplaceable into the room off our bedroom that we used as a small office. I put a lock on it. Nothing dramatic. Just a simple keyed lock from the hardware store in town. Claire watched me do it. You're preparing for something, she said. I'm being careful, I said. Same thing with you. I didn't tell her about the cameras. Not because I kept secrets from Claire. I don't, not in 34 years, but because I knew if she was aware of them, she'd hold herself differently. Stiffen at the wrong moments. I needed the next few months to look completely natural. I needed everyone to act like themselves. Roberta and Dennis arrived on a Friday in May, in a loaded Subaru that told me they'd packed more than 3 months' worth of anything. Dennis shook my hand at the door and said thank you, and I believed him. His knee was bad. He moved like a man in real discomfort, and there was nothing performed about it. Roberta walked through the front door and said, "Oh, it's so cozy." The way she said cozy. She touched things as she moved through the house. The curtains, the frame on the wall with the photo Claire had taken of the lake at dawn. The edge of the kitchen counter, not examining them, appraising them, like she was taking inventory. Dennis thanked me again in the kitchen. Roberta had already drifted toward the back porch and was looking at it with an expression I couldn't quite read but didn't like. The first incident happened on day 4. I came downstairs on a Tuesday morning to find the furniture in the living room rearranged. My chair, the recliner I'd had for 8 years, the one Claire had complained about for 7 of those years, and then come to love because it was just always there, had been moved to face the wall at an angle that made it completely useless for anything except looking at drywall. "Roberta," I said. She was in the kitchen making tea. "Morning," she said brightly. "Did you move the furniture in the living room?" I just shifted a few things. The flow was awkward. "You'll see, it opens the whole room up. It's my room," I said. "I'd like it back the way it was." She made a face that wasn't quite agreement and wasn't quite argument, the face of someone who has decided to let you have this one. "Of course," she said. I moved the chair back. The next morning, it was against the wall again. I moved it back. Didn't say a word. 3rd time it happened. I put it back and went out to the dock and sat for 20 minutes in the cold until the feeling in my chest settled. The cameras, meanwhile, were recording everything. The alert came on a morning in week 3. I was at the end of the dock with my coffee, 6:15, the early light just touching the far shore, when my phone buzzed. Kitchen camera, motion. I opened the app. Roberta was on her phone at the kitchen counter. She had her back half turned, The way people stand when they think no one's around. I turned up the volume on my phone as far as it would go. More space than I expected. Honestly, the third bedroom's bigger than our room at the condo was. A pause while she listened. Well, that's the thing. Dennis is doing so much better with the air and the quiet. He doesn't want to go back to the city. And I've been looking at it, really looking at it. And Phillip, I think if we position this right, another pause. The dock alone, the whole setup. They travel, right? She mentioned a cruise they were thinking about. If we're here, we're keeping an eye on things. It makes sense for everyone. We just need to be patient. I sat very still at the end of the dock. Position this right. Be patient. I texted Blythe. You'll want to see what I'm collecting. She wrote back, save everything. Cloud back up too. I went inside, made a second coffee, said good morning to Roberta like nothing in the world had happened. By week 4, a pattern had settled in. Phillip visited more often than felt casual. He and Roberta would sit on the screened porch after dinner when they thought Claire and I had gone to bed, which we hadn't, because the audio on that camera was excellent, and I'd get the notification on my phone from upstairs. What I understood, cumulatively, over those sessions, Roberta believed we would come around to a permanent arrangement if they made themselves indispensable. She had a theory about how to manage Claire. She just needs to feel like it was her idea. That I found, professionally speaking, impressive in its wrongness, because Claire is one of the least manageable people I have ever known, and I've known her for 37 years. Phillip had apparently told his parents that we were open to extending the arrangement, which we had never said to anyone. Dennis, from what I could gather, thought he was here for 3 months, and was increasingly uncomfortable about the rest of it. He said so to Roberta one evening, in a conversation she clearly considered private. She told him to stop being so rigid. He went quiet in the way men go quiet when they're picking their battles. I was starting to feel genuine sympathy for Dennis. One afternoon, he came out to the dock while I was replacing one of the boards. He lowered himself into the Muskoka chair slowly, the knee, and watched me work. You should know, he said after a while, that I told Phillip 3 months and I meant it. I know, I said. Roberta has different ideas. I've noticed. He was quiet. Then did Phillip tell you we were considering this long term? He told us you needed somewhere temporarily. Dennis exhaled. It was a long exhale, the kind that carries more than air. I see, he said. I suspected he'd colored things a bit. We didn't need to say more than that. We both knew what it meant. I kept working on the board. Dennis sat with his bad knee stretched out toward the water. You're a patient man, Gordon, he said. So I've been told, I said. The day everything came to a head started with a grocery run. Claire and I drove into town for supplies. It was a Wednesday, our usual day, and somewhere between the dairy aisle and the checkout my phone lit up. Living room camera, motion. I opened the app. Phillip was in my house. He hadn't called. He hadn't texted. He'd just let himself in, and from the footage I could see he had a key. A key from the hook by the door that I had not given him. He was walking the perimeter of the living room with a tape measure. An actual, physical tape measure. Roberta was with him, talking, gesturing at the wall between the living room and the small room off the kitchen that we used for storage. If this comes down, Roberta was saying, you've got a completely open concept, Phillip. It would be worth at least $40,000 in resale value, Mum. A third voice. Simone. My daughter was in my house, and I could tell from her voice she didn't know I was watching. Phillip, put the tape measure away. We're just looking. We're in their home. They're not here. That's not. Simone's voice dropped. That's not the point. Claire was standing next to me in the grocery store, holding a bag of apples, watching my face. Everything okay? She asked. Not entirely, I said. We should go home. I want to tell you I drove fast and arrived angry. That would make a better story, maybe. What actually happened was, I drove the speed limit the whole way. 40 minutes, with my hands very steady on the wheel and something very quiet happening in my chest. Something that had been building for 2 months and had just finished becoming whatever it needed to be. We pulled into the lane. Phillip's truck was there. I parked next to it and went inside. Simone was in the kitchen. She saw my face and went still. Dad, Phillip, I said. He came around from the living room with the tape measure. He looked caught for just a second. Then the polish came back over it. Gordon, we were just… I know what you were doing, I said. Why don't we all sit down? We sat. Dennis had appeared from somewhere the porch, I think. He stood in the doorway. Roberta sat at the table. Claire sat beside me and was very quiet, which in 34 years of marriage I've learned means she's reading the situation and decided I should handle it. I'd like to show you something, I said. I pulled out my phone. I opened the app, and I played the kitchen recording from week 3, Roberta at the counter. Her voice, level and clear, talking about positioning things right, about us traveling, about being patient. The kitchen went silent enough that I could hear the dock out back creaking in the wind. You've been recording us, Roberta said. I've been monitoring my own home, I said, using a system I installed before you arrived and disclosed in my property documentation, which I have on file. In Ontario, that's entirely within my rights. That's… Phillip started. Legal, I said. Yes. I checked. I looked at Simone. She was staring at Phillip with an expression I'd never seen on her face before. Not anger, exactly. More like someone solving a problem in their head and not liking the answer. I have more, I said. I played the porch conversation. Phillip and Roberta discussing the long-term plan, Roberta's theory about managing Claire, Phillip saying we were open to extending. I played the recording from the afternoon Dennis and Roberta had argued, where she'd told him to stop being rigid. I did not raise my voice. I didn't need to. At some point, Roberta said, I think you're being very cold about this. I said, that you stood in my kitchen and talked about my home's resale value on a phone call you believed was private. I'd be careful with the word cold. Dennis, from the doorway, made a sound. Not quite a word. More like a man releasing something he'd been holding for a while. Simone, Phillip said. She looked at him. The look she gave him, I'm not going to describe it in detail because it's private and it belongs to her. I'll just say I recognized it. It was the look Claire had given me once, years ago, when she'd discovered I'd made a large financial decision without telling her. Except worse, because at least I'd had the decency to be wrong about something I'd done myself, not something I'd hidden from someone who trusted me. You told me, Simone said to Phillip quietly, that this was stressing me out, that it was affecting our marriage. You used me. Again, not loud. Worse than loud. Then I told them the rest. The tape measure visit. The key that Roberta had taken from the hook by my front door without asking and copied or simply handed to her son. What Dennis had told me on the dock about the 3-month agreement Phillip had never honored in his communications with his own parents. I put all of it on the table, item by item, without heat, like I was presenting an invoice. Dennis stepped fully into the kitchen. He put his hand on the back of a chair. I want to apologize, he said. I should have pushed back harder from the start. I knew something wasn't right and I kept letting it go. Dennis. Roberta started. I'm talking, he said, in a voice I hadn't heard from him before. She stopped. I owe you both an apology, he said to me and Claire. This is your home. That should have been the end of it. Claire, who had been silent this whole time, reached over and put her hand briefly on Dennis's arm. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. Then I said the thing I'd been building toward for 2 months. You have 2 weeks to make other arrangements. Phillip's face did something complicated. Gordon, you walked into my home with a tape measure while I wasn't here, I said. You arranged for access to my house without my knowledge or consent. You told your parents a different version of this arrangement than you told us, and you used your wife's emotional well-being as leverage to push a decision on us faster. And at some point you started talking about which of my walls weren't load-bearing. I paused. 2 weeks. This is family, Roberta said. Yes, I said. And I'd like my family to stay my family. Which is why you're leaving before this goes any further. What followed those 2 weeks wasn't quiet. Phillip tried 3 separate approaches. An appeal to Simone that she refused to carry, a long conversation with Claire, in which he built what I can only describe as a deliberate architecture of guilt, and a text to me that was 4 paragraphs long and compared my unwillingness to house his parents permanently to abandoning them. Claire had watched all the recordings by then. She'd watched them alone, in the office room, for about an hour. She came out and made tea and didn't speak for a while. Then she said, she called me the softer one. I know, I said. She said if they worked on me it would come around, I know, Claire said, in the tone she reserves for things that do not require further comment. On day 11, Roberta came to Claire in the kitchen to talk about misunderstandings. Claire listened for approximately 90 seconds, then said, in a voice I genuinely didn't know she possessed, I think you should go for a walk, Roberta. Roberta went for a walk. Simone came to see me alone, on day 13, down by the dock. She sat in the Muskoka chair, the same one Dennis had used. I didn't know about the long-term plan, she said. About what he told me, that I was stressed about this. I didn't realize he was using it like that. I know you didn't, I said. Are you angry at me? I looked at her. I thought about her at 5 years old in the backyard in Sudbury, chasing the dog with a garden hose. I thought about her at 19, crying on the phone after her first bad semester, and me trying to say the right thing and mostly getting it wrong. I thought about the look on her face when she'd said to Phillip, you used me, and how that look had cost her something. No, I said, not at you. She put her head on my shoulder, the way she used to when she was small. We sat like that for a while. The lake was very still. Felix was up at the house with Claire, doing something involving stickers in the kitchen table. Dad, she said, after a bit. Yeah, I think I need to have some conversations. I think that's probably right, I said. Moving day was a Tuesday. I was on the dock at 6:15. My hour, the fog still on the water. When Dennis came down the path with his cane and a travel mug, he set the mug on the dock railing and held out his hand. I don't have the words for this properly, he said. You don't need them, I said. I do, actually. He kept his hand out until I shook it. You gave us your home for 2 months. What happened with that wasn't you. That was decisions other people made, and I didn't stop them the way I should have. I'm sorry for that. You told me you didn't ask for it, I said. I didn't, but I didn't stop it either. There's a difference. We stood there for a minute looking at the water. You going back to the city? I asked. Temporarily, he said, and something like a smile crossed his face. Just until we figure something out. He left. Roberta walked past me to the car with her eyes forward and her chin at an angle that told me she was storing something for later. I made a note of it and let it go. Phillip came last. He stood at the door to the screened porch, keys in his hand. He had the look of a man who'd prepared several things to say and was trying to decide which one fit. I hope, he said, that we can move past this. I set my coffee down. You walked into my home without an invitation and measured my walls, I said. You arranged access to my house through your mother without asking me. You presented your wife's emotional state to me as a reason to hurry up and give you what you wanted. And you told your parents a different story than you told us about what this arrangement was. I kept my voice even. And then, when I didn't react the way you expected, you tried to make me feel like I was the problem. He didn't say anything. So here's where we are, I said. What you did as documented. Every conversation, every recording, everything. And if there is ever another attempt to manage or maneuver or manipulate anyone in this family for your benefit, those recordings go to Simone. All of them. Every word. His face did something I hadn't seen before. Not anger, not even argument. It was the expression of a man who'd been reading a situation wrong for months and had just understood how wrong. Who'd looked at a quiet, patient man in his 60s, with a lake house and a recliner and a regular bedtime and seen something easy, and was only now understanding what he'd actually been dealing with. We clear? I said. Yes, he said. Good. Drive safe. They were gone before 11. Claire came and sat beside me on the dock with 2 cups of coffee, the dark roast she saves for days that earn it. She poured them both without a word and handed me mine. We watched the lake. You know, she said, after a while, when you put the lock on the office room, I thought you were overreacting. I know. I was wrong. You were optimistic, I said. Different thing. She looked at the water. What now? Now we have our house back. And Simone? Simone, I said, is having conversations. She'll land on her feet. She always has. Claire nodded. She leaned back in the chair. The fog was lifting off the far shore. A great blue heron came in low over the water and settled on the end of the dock, impossibly still. He really did come with a tape measure, Claire said. The laugh she let out wasn't the polite one she uses around company. It was the real one. The involuntary one that starts somewhere below her ribs. The one I've been trying to earn for 34 years. We sat there until the sun was fully up and the mist was gone and the heron had moved on. 8 weeks later, Simone told me she and Philip were separating. I want to be clear about how I felt about that. A marriage ending, even one that had something rotten in the frame, is not a moment to feel pleased about. My daughter was hurting. That was the only thing that mattered. But when she came up to the lake that first weekend, alone, without Philip, and sat on the dock while Felix ran along the shore, throwing rocks at absolutely nothing, and she turned to me after a long quiet and said, "Dad, when did you know?" I thought about the tape measure, and the smile before Claire finished her sentence, and the key taken off the hook without asking. "I didn't know for certain," I said. "I just paid attention." She shook her head. "You were ready. I was watching," I said. "That's all." Felix came barreling up the dock toward me, arms out, completely certain I would catch him in time. I did. He smelled like lake water and sunscreen. He said, "Grandpa, I found a really good rock," and held up something that looked like every other rock in Ontario, and I told him it was excellent because it was. The heron came back at dusk and stood at the end of the dock like it owned the place. I let it. The chair is back where it belongs. The lock on the office room is still there. Not because I need it, but because some lessons are worth keeping visible. Claire made her good potato soup last weekend, the one with the leeks and the thick cream, and we ate it on the screened porch with Felix while the sun went down over the water, and nobody held a tape measure, and nobody talked about walls. Philip took a position in Calgary a few months later. I heard this through Simone, who heard it from Dennis, who apparently calls her sometimes to check in on Felix. I don't know what that relationship looks like, exactly, but I think well of Dennis, and I hope it's something. What I think about sometimes, on the quiet mornings with the coffee and the water and the light coming through the pines, is this. There is a particular kind of mistake that people make about a certain kind of man. A man who's worked a long career and retired without fanfare, who drives an old truck and keeps his lawn tidy and doesn't talk unless he has something to say, who rearranges the chair back and then doesn't mention it again, who says "let me think about it" and means it. That kind of man, some people look at and see a soft landing, a place to redistribute a problem, someone who will absorb whatever you bring because it's easier than confrontation. What they don't see, because quiet people don't announce it, is that the patience is not absence, it's accumulation. It's 5 cameras on a private cloud server. It's every conversation on record. It's 2 months of documentation and a very calm voice in a kitchen, and a line you don't get to cross twice. I'm retired. I built something. I intend to keep it. The lake is quiet. The mornings are mine, and the chair, for the record, hasn't moved since. Welcome to Dad's final revenge. If this story felt familiar, hit that like button and subscribe. There are more where this came from, and the endings are always earned.